You also claim in the book that probably the single strongest legal case against Kissinger relates to declassified CIA documents that you have revealed and reprinted in the book that seem to indicate that he was directly involved in an assassination of a Chilean general who was against the ouster of President Allende at the time. Tell me about that story.
I think it's the strongest single case upon which Kissinger could be indicted, and it is the reason for the great nervousness that he shows about the new revelations of documents and the new legal context in which these occur. And we now have all the documents, and I've reprinted them all, that say there was a meeting at which it was decided Schneider must go. Identifiable men of violence in Santiago, people who had before tried to overthrow a conservative government in Chile from the right, a Christian democratic regime. In other words, not to mince words, a fascist group with a proven record of violence was found. Illegal money was sent to it. We have the records of that. Illegal weapons were shipped through the US diplomatic bag for their convenience and also for their reassurance, because they had guns of their own, but they needed the assurance of American endorsement. It's what we call a lay-down case. And you call it an assassination, and I don't dissent from that. But I would prefer a more old-fashioned word. It's a murder, it's a hit, it's a wet job, it's a whacking out. It's reading what I've presented in the book is like listening to the John Gotti tapes.
But again, the defenders say, well, you know, this was American foreign policy at the time, and that he was simply carrying out what was the deemed law of the land or practice of foreign policy at the time. What's your response to that line of defense?
It's been found beyond doubt by minute investigation in Washington that nobody in Congress, which has the power of the purse in these matters and the power to decide, ever knew that the National Security Advisor for President Nixon, Henry Kissinger, had evolved a plan to murder the head of the General Staff in a democratic country, not contiguous to but neighboring the United States, a democracy with which the United States was not at war. No one was ever told of that plan. We know of no authorization for Kissinger to have carried it out.
Let alone the bombing of Cambodia.
The bombing of Cambodia was likewise concealed from Congress. It's flattering to the American people they have to be lied to so much, I sometimes think. Look at it. Most of Henry Kissinger's policies actually issue in calamity, farce, fiasco, disaster. Indochina, probably the most perfect failure in the history of American foreign policy. Everybody loses. Everyone's worse off than when they began. Chile. They asphyxiate democracy in Chile for 20 years. It finally revives very painfully. What have they gained? Nothing. Who's lost? Anyone who cares about democracy. East Timor, bloody nightmare. No one the winner. Finally the Indonesians give up their claim to East Timor and return to a semblance of democracy. Cyprus. Very nearly a war within NATO, a completely pointless and destructive war, leads to the absolute devastation of Cypriot society. Henry Kissinger looks at what he's done, gets on a plane, flies away, never lets the word Cyprus cross his lips ever again. Bangladesh. It goes on and on. Where's the realpolitik in this? This is not a detached, tough-minded conservative statesman conducting business without sentimentality. This is a vandal, a barbarian, a crook, a man who thinks only in the short term and is mainly preoccupied with the reputation of himself and his extremely crooked boss.
What about the old argument of moral equivalency, that these are just part and parcel of practices of the Cold War, and that what the communists were doing was every bit as awful and required a counterbalance?
Attacking and killing a democratic, conservative, constitutional officer in a neighboring democracy with which the US is not at war, and a country, by the way, that can threaten nobody, Chile, in collusion with a fascist criminal group, is not anti-communism. It is, in fact, collusion with fascism. Well, I'd go further and say that I don't greatly care to be lectured on anti-Stalinism by Mao Zedong's best friend, by Leonid Brezhnev's preferred negotiating partner, by the man who told Gerald Ford when he was president that he shouldn't receive Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Oval Office, which Congress thought he should, because it might offend the communists, who were Kissinger's friends, by the man who is paid by the Stalinists in Beijing to this day to defend the massacre of their own young people in Tiananmen Square. I won't have it from him that he's doing this against communism. It's just another of the constituents of the gigantic lie that constitutes his reputation. He's a thug, and a crook, and a liar, and a pseudo-intellectual, and a murderer. Okay? All of those things are factually verifiable.
strong.
Factually verifiable.
He's also,
that he is an anti-communist is a speculation that he likes to encourage.